Okay.
I'd like to welcome to the show Lou, aka Hunit Days of Summer. How are you today, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. Just think. First off, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I've really over these last couple of weeks, I was kind of telling you before we kind of hopped on. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about different perspectives within
Okay.
this entire world. You know what I mean? I've watched a lot of your videos, and a lot of what I've done. Um, research wise about you, I've learned so much and understand some of the perspectives a little bit different. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those. We'll go in those a little bit later. But so again, thank you for coming on the show today.
I'm I'm not sure if you're hearing it on your side, but there was a lot of distortion there.
Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me now or
Yeah, it's better now.
okay.
Okay.
Um let's see here. All right. So before we kind of get into the big topics. I kind of
Hmm.
wanted to kind of pick your brain about how you kind of got into the music business.
Okay. Man, I've been rapping since I don't since I was a kid, since I was about 8 years old. My brother, who is his deceased now, but one of the last things he did was he wrote a rap for me, and he gave it to me, and he said, "Finish this," and that was like the beginning of me rapping. You know what I mean? I feel like that's one of the greatest gifts that he gave me. Started me off that way, and then it kind of progressed and progressed. Then I started going to church at 19, and I started doing gospel rap then. I left the church after about 10 or 11 years and started doing music again. But at that time, I had gained the experience of being an internet marketer, so I knew how to promote my music at that point. And yeah, I used a little tactic that I learned from Robert Kiyosaki, one of his books, and was able to get like millions and millions of people exposed to my music for free. And at that point, just trying to grow my brand and stuff. But it's honestly it's a passion. I like to do it, but I don't, it's not how it used to be. Like, I'm not hungry to be famous or get my music heard or anything like that. I was literally just using it so that people would gravitate to me so that I could finally talk to people about things that I thought was actually important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was listening to one of the posts that you had posted on Instagram, and it really kind of resonated with me, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit. You kind of used this analogy that nobody is sympathetic when a black man is killed, and you were using that analogy, comparing it to like a dog,
Hmm.
and how people care more about that,
Yeah,
and how black people fit this mold and this brand. In
yeah.
your opinion, how do black people change that brand?
So, all right. So there's two aspects that I'm going to say about that, because one, my perspective of that has shifted some. It
Okay.
shifted some because when I first said that, that was I was on my Instagram live, and people were asking me to talk about George Floyd without me actually looking at the looking at the video, looking into any of the situation. I just went on a rant talking about, basically why people get away with police brutality. And at that time, I really hadn't done any research to look into the situations other than the mainstream narrative. So what I was speaking on there was actually from that place of not understanding. But what at the time what I was saying was basically like you said, that if we could rebrand ourselves like puppies or babies, because people care when something happens to them. But right now, I felt like at that point I felt like we were branded as like spiders. People attack spiders viciously, whether the spider's going to cause them harm or not, which 10 out of 10 times is not going to do anything to them, but they're going to attack it viciously. So that's how I was seeing the world seeing us. But then the response to George Floyd happened, and the entire world wore T-shirts, created art, protested in other countries where they don't even know who the man is or anything about the story. They just know the narrative, and basically the entire world was like, "We care about y'all. We're sorry that this is happening to you." So at that point, I was like, "Wait a minute!" All the companies stood up and were like, "We're going to pledge this much. We're going to pledge this much." All the actors and stuff, I take responsibility, and everyone doing what they're doing. I'm like, wait a second, we've already been rebranded. like through this narrative, we've been rebranded as victims. You know what I mean? We've been rebranded as oppressed. We've been, and everyone feels the responsibility now to try to come in there and try to fill that void. And my narrative on that, my mental narrative on that has now changed because I'm listening to totally different content from people who have actually achieved in the face of real systemic racism, real systemic on the book racism. And it's changed my perspective on us and our potential. And now I still think that we need to be rebranded, but in a different way. We need to be rebranded to see ourselves as not being oppressed, as our disparities not being based on discrimination or bias or any of that type of stuff. And we need to also do our own research as opposed to just believing the narratives and the one-sided narrative on social media as well.
Do you think one of the biggest things that we tackle daily is the lack of knowledge?
Yes, and I think honestly, I'm going to say the lack of knowledge, but I think the biggest thing that we have to tackle is the misinformation, because that seems to be the thing that when if I've had this conversation with a few of my family members now. I've had it with a bunch of people on Instagram, and it's everyone has a narrative about certain things that just isn't true when you just go and do your own research. But I can't blame them for seeing things the way that they see it when it's shaped that way by the people who create our media. When they're able to take a certain clip that they know creates a certain perspective and put that out there into the atmosphere, I can't blame people for believing it because we're supposed to trust these people. You
Right.
know what I mean? And it just doesn't seem to really be helping us.
Absolutely, because we live in a day and age of social media where we see a Facebook post and our first reaction is, I went through something like this the other day. I saw a Facebook post, or I mean, I saw a tweet, and
Mm-hmm.
it just said something, right? And I got mad, right? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't click the article. I didn't go into the article. I just got mad because of the headline. I get in a
Yeah.
text message conversation with some friends. I'm like, oh my God. A couple hours later, I click the article, I read it, and it's the complete opposite of what this person said.
Wow.
And that to me is obviously I own that, right? You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
own that. And to me, I think that's another thing that we do. We could have a headline, let's just hypothetically say, even when we take the debate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trump did not denounce white supremacy on the stage, right? And obviously, everybody, including yourself and some other people, have pointed out, well, what about this a couple weeks earlier when he stated this, right?
Yeah.
But all the headlines state he didn't denounce it on this stage. The,
Right.
the misinformation is troubling, correct?
Yes. Yes, it is.
And
Yes, it is.
and you're right. It's kind of like when people paint the narrative of cops are out there to serve and protect and not kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understandable. The media is supposed to be out here to give us the information, right, and not the misinformation.
Exactly.
And we're being flooded with all this misinformation.
Yeah.
So I was one of those people. The George Floyd
Okay.
incident happened, which still one of the most traumatic things I've ever watched.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
think people took George Floyd's death and it exploited it for things that it really wasn't?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I've seen it. So I didn't even know. All right. So at that time, that situation kind of woke me up because that was the first time I realized that every time you see this situation, it's always a white police officer killing an unarmed black person. That's when I went to go and look to see if any unarmed white people were actually killed. Because at the time I didn't believe it was happening. Because why would that happen if cops only kill us because of our skin color, right? They're afraid of us. That's why they're ready to shoot us when there's no threat. That was the place that I was living under. So when I went and looked at the actual statistics and the numbers, that's when I realized, wait a minute, why do they only show us this then? Because I do marketing, I do advertising. So I understand that, you create a moral to the story in a very invisible way. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
some people might not be yeah. So it's like I understand that there's a point to this. So I'm like, well, why are they only showing us this? At the time I really didn't understand. So I asked people on Instagram. And of course, a bunch of people attacked me. A bunch of people attacked me. More attacks than. And I asked for names. I'm like, does anybody know of any unarmed white people killed by the police? Out of the 100 or so, it might have been 200 comments that I got 3 names. Three. And those names were from like 2016, 17, but none of them were from, 2019 or 2020.
Right.
So, but there was someone who DM'd me a screenshot that was very eye-opening. They showed me that Black Lives Matter, the term, Black Lives Matter protest, the term, and Black Man Shot, all trend, all began trending upwards last election cycle, the exact same time that it was trending this year. So it was around July last year, July in 2016. It was around June this year. So it ramped up around the exact same time where it hit its peak. And someone says this is what the Democrats like to do towards elections, where they'll basically highlight and give like overbearing news coverage to topics about racism, and making it seem as if racism is the most dangerous thing for Black people during this time, and that they will be the ones who fight against it. Because obviously, what everybody believes is the Republicans are the racist party, the Democrats are the party of social justice. And when they said that to me, I honestly didn't believe it, because I'm like, no one would be that crazy. No one's that sadistic just to get votes. I
Right.
can't see that. I'm like, especially when, of course, we're going to vote Democrat. It's like, that's not a question. I've never questioned that before. Everyone that I know is like, yes, the Democrats, the Democrats, the Democrats. So I'm like, they wouldn't have to go that hard. Yeah, come to find out, actually they do. That's like I found a book by a guy named Manning Johnson called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. This guy was a former communist, a Black communist, and he was a agitation propaganda director. That's what he did, was create propaganda that enhanced or intensified racial tension, because the point was to cause a type of civil war in a sense, so that the outsides could come in and take over.
Right.
And he says the exact same thing in his book, that media gives specific coverage to racial incidents or ones that can be interpreted as being racial. And white northern politicians capitalize on that propaganda to get Black votes. And that book was written in 58. He entered the Communist Party in the 30s or something like that. So I'm like, he
Wow.
was giving up the strategies. So I'm like, whoa, he's saying the same thing the guy in my DM said. I'm like, maybe there is something to this thing. And that's when I started looking more into it, and it's crazy what I found.
Absolutely. So for me, for me personally, when I say the term Black Lives Matter, I
Mhm.
I mean genuine Black lives, right? I mean,
Right.
the misconception of the narrative is you have on one side you have the Black Lives Matter organization, right?
Mhm.
Which in my research I have found that it is kind of like what 90% of the other organizations in society that
Yeah.
are broken, that are just set up for collecting money, right?
Right.
But on the flip side of it, I see I went down Nashville,
Mhm.
protested, very peaceful, very honest, very just personal
Okay.
conversations that we had with all sorts of different kind of individuals. How do we get the narrative of Black lives? How do we separate that? How do we separate the Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter organization?
That's the thing. I think that, to be honest with you, I honestly don't think that you can, because one of the things, like I said, when I read this book, the exact same things that Manning Johnson details as far as what his movement was, because he was the organizer of the movement, but the movement is literally fulfilling the agenda of the organization, and is using very earnest people who are same way how I felt when I saw George Floyd, same way how you felt when you saw George Floyd. But the narrative that is shaped is what creates that feeling in us. That is happening. That happens. It doesn't happen as often as they make it seem that it happens. It's not an epidemic. It's not the number one cause of Black people being killed, though that is the narrative that they are shaping. Now, under that narrative, everyone needs to be out in the streets. But under the true narrative, we have other issues that we could actually put our resources, our time, our energy, and our conversations into. And that I know, for a lot of people, that's going to sound very insensitive. I hate to say it, because I know what I'm going up against. But when
Right.
you look at the numbers, so there was a, like, say for example, there was a survey done in 2015 by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Now, according to that survey, and they use a sample group to get this larger number, but according to that survey, African Americans had around 6.1 million interactions with the police. 6.1 million. Out of that 6.1 million, there were 78 unarmed black people that were killed that year. So 78 unarmed black people out of 6.1 million interactions. That kills the narrative that there's an epidemic. Do unarmed black people get killed by the police? Yes, they do. That same year, 91 unarmed white people were killed by the police. So if everyone wants to get together because about 1,000 or to 1,200 people are killed by the police, period, regardless of your color, if everybody wants to get together and march over that, I'm all for that, because that's based on logic, that's based on statistics and facts. But to have people out in the streets, not because I understand you said that your protest was peaceful. In Philadelphia, where I come from, they destroyed everything, over this narrative. And for me, that is unacceptable, especially because it's like you said, you get that one narrative that invokes emotion, and some people don't take it as peacefully as I would like everyone to. And they
Right.
get into the streets, and then more people die. Businesses are burnt down, as well as neighborhoods, which puts those neighborhoods in an even worse situation economically, which is going to make more crime. The police are afraid to be called racist, so they back off. More crime, and that doesn't help anybody at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It doesn't help anybody, and it demonizes the same people that you're supposed to be looking for help, because of one narrative that is really just highlighting something that is a very small situation compared to what they're trying to make it out to be. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. So, and then if you look at, so my question to you, I guess, is this. All right. So you hear
Okay.
the term oppression, you hear the term systematic racism.
Mm-hmm.
For me, those terms aren't, those are very demonizing terms, right? And when
Yeah.
you think about stuff like that, we still live in a society where there is obstacles placed in front of you. Do you
Mm-hmm.
still feel that way, correct?
Honestly, no.
No.
Honestly,
Okay.
no. And I attribute that to people like Tom Sowell, Walter E. Williams, Jason Riley, and one of the people's least favorites, Larry Elder. Right? People don't like him for some reason, but the other ones are very, well, I mean, they're all honored. People just don't know the other ones to demonize them, but people know Larry Elder. So when you listen to these men talk, and they all are kind of like they get their information from people like Tom Sowell, Walter E. Williams. When you listen to those guys, what they do is they give you actual data that backs up disparities, and they're looking to see if it's actual bias or if there's another reason for it, right? So one of the examples would be how black people as a whole don't earn as much income as white people as a whole. Now, if you break that down to specific black ethnic groups as opposed to lumping everybody in the same category, you're going to see a totally different picture. You're going to see Nigerian Americans doing better than a lot of other ethnic groups. You know what I mean? So it's in a sense like that. You're going to see people who come from the Caribbean doing a lot better than people who are African Americans born in America. So when you break those groups down, you see a total different situation. But as long as you can lump them all in, they're going to get a different picture. Now, if you lump them all in, even still, the fact is the African American race is younger than the white race. So what you have there is that means that we wouldn't have as much experience, as much time in the job field to be able to earn as much. But when you actually measure everything equally, when you say, okay, let's measure the group that has all this in common with this group that has all the same things in common, and then see if we see a disparity, a lot of times black people are actually doing better. But no one says that part of the story, because not every no one's obviously, I don't know if
Nobody wants to
anybody's
hear
going to
that. Nobody wants to hear that.
exactly
Yeah.
exactly.
It
It's
doesn't
it's
fit the
not
narrative of
satisfying.
what they're trying to push.
Exactly. So Tom Sowell has been a very eye-opening person for me. Very eye-opening. Walter E. Williams, Jason Riley, same thing. Jason Riley has a book called Please Stop Helping Us. And that book is basically showing how when LBJ started saying, like, it's not good enough that we just, give you equal opportunity. It's not good enough. We need to give you a boost, a head start. We need to push you forward. We need to specifically focus in on you to add, to make sure that you win. That actually hurt us. All those programs that were implemented actually began to hurt us in ways that I never even imagined, ways that I attributed to the legacy of slavery. But that's because no one's really teaching the black history, or at least the black history of progression in between the first 100 years after slavery up until 1965. No one's teaching that, except
Right.
for a handful of people. And when I listen to that information, it's like I was starving my whole life and didn't know it. And when I listen to these men talk, I eat it up. I eat it up because it's very empowering. It shows a whole different perspective on what you can accomplish. And no one will argue the fact and say that America is more racist today than during Jim Crow. But the things that we were doing during Jim Crow lets me know that today I have no right to complain. I can do it. My dad is from Nigeria. He passed away. My dad was from Nigeria. He came here because he thought education was important. While I don't think education is important,
Yeah.
that's how I saw the world. My friend's dad also passed away, but he was from Kenya. He used to sit us on the porch and talk to us for 3 hours. We just trying to get in the house so we can get $1 to go buy a blunt so we can roll up our weed. That's what we every single time. And he would catch us, have us on the porch, and he would talk to us for about 3 hours. Him and his other Kenyan friend, about how lazy we are because we don't value the opportunities that we have here. And I'm like, don't you know? Because I'm thinking the same thing.
Right.
Racism, you know what I mean? Oppression. What are you talking about? But no, where he comes from, he understands true poverty. He understands true lack of opportunity. So what he comes here and sees is a plethora of opportunity, and they all won. My dad graduated in one. His dad graduated in one. They were. I know a lot. Most first generation Africans, at least, their folks are winning, and that the first generation African Americans, that come from that side, all feel overbearing, with their parents' desires for them to achieve. It's weird. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's just to me that's just a difference in culture.
Absolutely. So the one thing that has kind of intrigued me, and I've heard you say this before, I think it was at the interview with Samir, and I've seen you say it on a couple other posts. When you first decided to start speaking out, did you
Mhm.
have the concerns of maybe the threats or I can't believe you're speaking out against us and stuff like that? Or did you just know deep down, like, this is the right thing for me to do? I don't care. I know I'm going to get blowback, but I don't care.
Yeah. It for a second, I thought, because my whole narrative, is I relate to myself in the paradigm of being a spirit with a body, not a body with a spirit. So my identity lies. I try to keep my identity in that paradigm. So when I look at situations that way, that's what I want to talk to people about. It's like, hey man, if you understood the spiritual underlying of all this stuff, none of this would make you upset or afraid. But I know I can't just speak to people like that because they haven't taken those steps to get there. It's going to sound insensitive. It's going to sound crazy to some people. So
Right.
instead, I sit back, I listen to what people say, and I try to interject certain things and that would make them think, as opposed to just react. But when I saw those numbers, when I got to the statistics of the unarmed white people versus black people, that's when I knew I had to say something, because it isn't just, you know, we need not fear racism because we don't die. You can't die. You need not fear racism because you can actually create your own life through vision. You know what I mean? And I've never felt withheld. I've never felt like anything could ever stop me. I've been an internet marketer full time since about 25, and I'm 37 now. So when I've always felt like I could succeed regardless of whatever the economy is going through, whatever. So when I looked at that situation, when I saw the statistics, that's when I was like, nah, we're being manipulated. This I need to speak on, because I think people need to know this. Because if they knew more unarmed white people were killed than us, maybe they wouldn't think that it was a racial issue. Maybe then they would question, why don't we ever hear about them? Why is that never on the news? Why don't those videos ever go viral, making it seem as if it only happens to us? So that's when I knew I had to speak. Now I did sit there and think for a second, like, wow, I'm doing well. I just got my blue check. I got these followers. Like, there's been celebrities that have come to my page and thanked me for some of the videos I've done in the past. And I'm like, I could lose all of that.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I always say integrity is its own reward. I need to be able to live with myself. I need to be able to sleep at night and find peace within. I need to know that I'm basically accomplishing the mission that I feel like I'm here to do. And that ain't to make people feel happy. That ain't to coddle people. That ain't to, tickle people's ears. It's to say what needs to be said. And I learned that last year. It's like every time I had a message I was afraid to post, I would take forever to write the caption because I'm always trying to explain and defend myself first. And,
Yeah.
and it got to the point where I would just start putting faces and emojis instead and just post it. And I would be so drained from it, I would have to take a nap and I'd wake up and, oh, wow, everybody agrees. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. But in this case, it was the opposite. But I didn't stop because I really believed in what I was doing. You know what I mean? People accuse me of getting paid, getting paid by the Republicans or something like that, or getting paid by Fox News or whatever they think I'm trying to do. Is ironic that the same people that the same people who don't want to be looked at as a monolithic block are literally judging me for being different. It's weird.
It's pretty crazy. So I got a question for you. Why do you support President Trump?
Okay. All right. So the main reason is specifically because I don't think that he is a racist. And I think that he is being demonized by the media because every time I go and look into anything that they say about him, it's typically the opposite. So that started when I really didn't care, to be honest with you, because at first I didn't think he was a racist because like I said, I was in the hip hop culture. Everybody loved him.
Right.
Everybody loved him, right?
Right.
I can go and find, like, say for example, if somebody take a picture, if you could dig up a picture with Jeffrey Epstein and somebody, you look at that person like, oh, I don't know about him now. That's what people do. You
Yeah.
take a picture with Lil Jon and Donald Trump. Nobody's gonna look at Lil Jon and say maybe Lil Jon was a closet racist too. They're not
Right.
gonna do that. But all of a sudden, Trump becomes racist because there's narrative. I can do a Google search, like you can go to Google. There's a certain way you can look at all the content from a specific year when you do a search. I did that. I did 2000. I think I went all the way to 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. And I put Donald Trump and racist. Nothing in 2014, nothing in 2015. And well, it started to happen towards the end of 2015 after he announced. And then it got even harder in 16, harder in 17, crazy in 18. And it's like, yo, this is crazy. Like, you can literally see it progress simply because he chose to run. So when I look at that situation, the first time I was actually disappointed in him was the very fine people on both sides, right? When I saw that clip, that's when I was like, wow, maybe I was wrong about him. Then somehow, maybe I was doing a search to see if he was racist or not. Somehow I come across a video that was saying you need to watch the entire clip. I went and watched the entire clip. He starts off talking about Antifa. People didn't even know what Antifa was then. He says, you got the guys on this side with the hats and the clubs. Did you see them? They're wearing all black. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's Antifa. And he goes on to say, somebody in the crowd, one of the reporters was like, you said that there were bad people on both sides. And he was like, yeah, there were bad people on both sides. But you also had very fine people on both sides. And I'm not talking about the white nationalists or the neo-Nazi. They should be condemned totally. And I was like, wait, this must be the cleanup interview. This can't be the same interview that they took the clip from to create that narrative. And I went and looked, and oh no, this is the same interview. This is right afterwards. I'm like, so why didn't they show the part where he condemned him? Had me thinking that he didn't condemn him. Had me
Right.
waiting for him to condemn them. And I'm like, that right there, that was the first step because you don't have to do that to a racist. You just let them talk. You just let a racist person talk. You know, I say that you don't have to let I don't know if you profanity can you be used on here, but you don't let a piece of crap, you don't have to, you just let it stink. That's all you got to do. That's what it does. So when I
Absolutely.
saw that, that's when I realized, they creating a narrative. Interesting. And that was before George Floyd. So that once I got to that point there, that's when I was totally done with him. And I'm like, I can't trust y'all worth anything. I got to look at every single situation individually by myself. And at that point, when I continued to look, I'm like, wait, there was a time when Jesse Jackson was working with him and he congratulated him for his work in the black community. I'm like, why would he do that if he was racist? Al Sharpton worked with him. Al Sharpton is recorded saying now recently, we didn't change, he changed. So wait a minute, you're saying that Donald Trump wasn't always racist, he just became racist when he started running for president? Is that what you're saying? It's like, why is none of this information out in the public? And why is this information basically just nobody's ever seen it, and even when you present it to people, the other narrative is so ingrained in them that their perception instantly shapes it in, oh, that was him just pandering, that was him just, all right, if you say so, but what did he have to gain by pandering back then in the 90s? You know what I mean? Like I posted a video on my stories today in 2000 where he was going to run in the Reformer Party. And they asked him why. He says, "Well, the party's collapsing." They say, when you say the party's collapsing, what is the main reason you say? He was like, "Well, you got David Duke just entered the party, a bigot, a racist. That's not the kind of person you want in your party." It's like these are the things that he's been saying forever. No, but no, his club, the Mar-a-Lago club, I think that's how you say it in Miami, was the only club allowing blacks and Jewish people into the club back then. It's like no one brings that type of stuff up. When he let Jennifer Hudson, I believe that's how you say her name, Jennifer Hudson, live in his Trump Towers or something like that. When her mother and her family was killed, it's like let her stay there for free. Nobody brings up any of those types of things because they believe he's a racist. They don't even know those things exist. I know I didn't until I went and looked for myself.
Yeah, because
So no,
nobody's
I
willing
don't
to do
buy
that
that narrative.
research. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
nobody's willing. Exactly. Everybody's willing to take a clip, take it for what it's worth, and then run
yeah,
with it, right? And I think
right.
that's I mean, the media as a collective whole struggles at. It's all about clicks. It's all about views. It's
Yeah,
all about we know that. You know what I mean? We all
unfortunately. Yeah,
obviously that being in the social media game as it is. Everybody's. It's all about the next click. It's all about the
yeah,
next this, next that. But at the same time, that could equally kill a lot of individuals, their mind frame and stuff like that.
yeah.
So my final question for you, and this is the last one I like to ask all my guests in the show.
Okay.
When you pass away, what do
Mm.
you want your legacy to be?
That and I like that question. When Kobe passed away, what I said was what I would like is for the energy of my spirit to live on. Like not to be afraid of death, but to be afraid that my life didn't really mean anything. So I love that question. What I would like people to remember about me was that the fact that I went against the grain in the sense of not just doing it to be popular, but doing it because I thought it was right. Always telling people the truth, whether they wanted to hear it or not, for being candid in that way. And that's one of the things. Like my one of my closest friends, literally just we got off of we were actually arguing about systemic racism and stuff on live, but we ended it in peace and in love. And he called me later and he talked to me and he said, I know I can always get that from you. I can't get that from everybody else, but I know I can always get that from you. Whether I want to hear it or not, you're going to tell me the truth. And it's always truth that helps me. That's what I want to be known for. He gave me something that benefited my life. That's all I care about. That's how I'm going to continue to live on. I just want to basically be infectious in people's mindsets that create a system of functionality within them that they couldn't achieve. That's what I want because I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Where can people find you, man, on social media?
100 Days of Summer, 100 Days of Summer. You look that up on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and you'll find me there. Or you could Google me. I'm on Google too, all over Google. So
I'll
that's
put
the
I'll put all of his information in the notes here as well, folks. Thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Yeah, most